Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talks at Google. Today is World Health Day, and we have the perfect guest for that occasion, Dr. Neal Barnard. He is here to teach us about the power of nutrition for health. Start off, introduce myself. I'm Pat. I'm a software engineer at Google, and I have the honor of hosting Dr. Neal Barnard today. First off, I want to let you know that you can ask questions live in the YouTube chat, and we will bring some of your questions directly to Neal to answer at the end of the presentation today. So, time to introduce Dr. Neal Barnard. He has a long list of credentials I want to share with you. He's a nutrition researcher who has authored more than 100 scientific publications and 20 books. His most recent book is Your Body in Balance. I encourage you to check that out if you want to learn more after today's talk. He's hosted 4 PBS television programs on nutrition and health. He has an MD degree from the George Washington University School of Medicine, a fellow of the American College of Cardiology, adjunct professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine. He's the editor-in-chief of the Nutrition Guide for Clinicians. He's received the Medical Society of the District of Columbia's Distinguished Service Award. And he is the president and founder of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, where he puts this research to work in shaping public policy. He's also founded the Barnard Medical Center, where he puts this research to work in treating patients. So with that great list of achievements, I want to welcome to Google, to Talks at Google, Dr. Neal Barnard. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, Pat. It's great to be with you today. Really appreciate the opportunity because we're going to talk about a new topic, and that's how foods affect our hormones.
Excellent.
Good. Should I go ahead and jump in? All right. The old approach to thinking about food was you eat a bad food and what happens? You might gain weight, or your cholesterol will go up, or you get diabetes, or the bad food causes some disease. But we could be much more sophisticated about it. The foods that you eat control your hormones, and your hormones control everything in your body. And so if you can control what they do, you can lose weight, you can have any number of changes in your body that you hadn't otherwise anticipated. So let's start at the beginning. What the heck are hormones anyway? Well, hormones are made in one part of the body, and they go in the bloodstream to another part of your body, like a letter in the mail. And what could ever go wrong with the hormones? You might have too many letters in the mail. You might not have enough letters in the mail. So let's say your thyroid gland at the base of your neck, if it's not sending out enough thyroid hormone, you're hypothyroid. But if it's sending out too much, you're hyperthyroid. Okay? So that hormones are just information that goes from one part of the body to another part to control its action. Example, insulin, made in the pancreas, goes in through the blood to the muscle cells to let sugar get into the cell, goes to the liver cells to let sugar enter the liver cells. And we did a research study back almost 20 years ago to try to see if we could help insulin to work differently. Here's what we did. We brought in people who had type 2 diabetes, and you know what that means? That means their blood sugar has gone up. Why? Their body is making insulin, but the insulin is not able to get sugar to go from the blood into their cells. They're insulin resistant. And we tested a portion-controlled diet that's a conventional kind of diabetes diet versus an entirely plant-based diet. And in a minute, I'm going to show you why we decided to do that. But let me walk you through what the diets were. The portion-controlled diet is a traditional kind of diabetes diet that you might get at any clinic. Cut calories to try to lose weight. Keep carbohydrate fairly steady. Don't eat bad fats like saturated fat. Pretty standard advice. But the plant-based diet used a different theory. It didn't limit calories. It didn't limit carbohydrates at all. It just said, don't eat animal products. Keep oils really low. You can see that we're getting away from animal fats and vegetable fats, but note to self, we're going to see why fat might be important. Third step, favor low glycemic index foods. All that means is, say, white bread, is high glycemic index. That means it causes your blood sugar to rise. But if I have the same amount of rye bread, it's more gentle on my blood sugar. Pumpernickel, even more so. Okay, fair enough. So no animal products, minimize oils, favor low glycemic index foods. What did we find? To cut to the chase, we track A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is an indicator of your blood sugar control. And we want it to be below 7 if you have diabetes. The red line here is the portion control diet, the conventional diet. And they did really well. Their A1C dropped by about 0.4 absolute percentage points. That's good. So that red line drop, that's important. But that blue line drop, that's the people in the vegan group, the plant-based group, and their blood sugar improved 3 times more. They had a drop of about 1.2 absolute percentage points. Not only bigger than the control group, but bigger than you get with oral medications. Okay. And when we did this study, one of our first participants was named Vance. Vance had been a policeman, and he worked in a bank. And he came into our study and he said, my grandma had diabetes, my grandpa had diabetes, I got diabetes, and if I don't get this under control, I'm probably going to lose a leg, go blind, something like that. Well, he was randomly assigned to the vegan group. And the first thing he said was, this is a really easy diet. And I thought, wait a minute, Vance, people don't think of vegan as easy. They think it means you've got to acquire a taste for folk music or wear tie-dyed clothes or something like that. He said, no. You don't make me count carbs. You don't make me cut calories or anything. You just say, and instead of meat chili, have bean chili. Instead of ground beef on my spaghetti, have tomato sauce. Very easy. And he lost 60 pounds over about a year. He stopped his diabetes medications, and his A1C dropped from 9.5, which is high, to 5.3, which is absolutely normal. When I got that result, I had to close my office door because this was not something that doctors see. A person with well-established diabetes that is poorly controlled that actually goes away in a person on no medication. That's what I seem to have in front of me on this lab slip. And of course, now we see this all the time. But let me walk you through what happened in Vance's body, okay? If you're doing something else, if you're texting or talking to somebody else, let me have your attention for the next 2 minutes. I'm going to show you my most important images. This purple circle is going to tell us what causes diabetes and how we reverse it. This oval is a muscle cell. And it's a muscle cell in your body, and muscles run on glucose. That's their gasoline, as it were. And the glucose is all in the blood, and it cannot get into that cell. The muscle cell's membrane keeps it out. It won't go through until you have a certain key, and that key is insulin. Hormone made in the pancreas. It goes through the blood to the cell, and it attaches to the surface of the muscle cell. And once it does, that key opens little channels to let the glucose come in. Okay? So the insulin key opens up the cell, and the glucose can come in, and everything's fine. What could go wrong? What goes wrong is that was my dinner. That was my lunch. That's my breakfast. I'm eating a lot of fatty foods. Are these fatty foods? They sure are. There's fat on all these things, including chicken without the skin. 23% of its calories are from fat. Okay, so what happens? The fat that I eat builds up inside the cell. Tiny microscopic fat particles. Now, doctors hate words like fat because it's got only one syllable. So we like to call it intramyocellular lipid, but it's just fat inside the muscle cell. And what that means is that insulin can still attach to the surface of the cell, but the insulin stops working. The cell is now insulin resistant. The fatty accumulation in the cell stopped insulin from working. It created insulin resistance, and now the sugar can't get into the cell. It raises the blood sugar, and your doctor says, I don't know what's wrong, but if I were you, I'd stop eating carbohydrate, don't eat any sugar, and let's try to control your blood sugar. Wrong. That was never the problem. The problem is inside that cell. Okay, what can I do? Let's say I do what Vance did. How much animal fat is in his diet? None. 0. How about if I keep oils really low? Well, then there's not much of any fat in my diet. And the fat inside the cell starts to dissipate. And as it does, the insulin sensitivity returns to that cell. The insulin can now signal the cell to open up again, and the glucose can come back into the cell. And if you're advanced, your diabetes improves and improves, and you get off your medicine, and eventually it's no longer detectable. That's good. Okay, let me shift gears. Insulin is a hormone, and we've seen that we can change insulin's action based simply on what we eat. And that difference is profound, but it's not the only hormone in your body. Estrogens. I was sitting at my desk one day and I got a call from a young woman who had terrible menstrual cramps. Many women get cramps, but for about 1 in 10, it's like, I cannot get to work today. And I suggested to her something. She had a business trip the next day. She needed to get on a plane and she wanted painkillers. And I said, I'll give you some painkillers for 2 days. But I said, let's see if we can stop this from happening next month too. Let's head it off in advance. She said, I love it. What can we do? I said, no animal products for the next month and minimize oils. Now, wait a minute. How could that affect cramps? Hold that thought. She decided to try it. She got to her meeting and she came back. And 4 weeks later, she called me again and said, Dr. Barnard, this is astounding. I got my period today with 0 symptoms. And the same thing the next month and the next month. And as long as she followed these 2 steps, she was fine. Okay. So I thought, that's impressive. We need to put this to the test. So with our colleagues at Georgetown University's Department of OBGYN, we did a randomized trial. Women with menstrual pain were randomly assigned to either the diet that I just described or to a supplement that was actually a placebo. Then after 2 months, two cycles, they switched. The diet group started the supplement and vice versa. And in a nutshell, it worked. We published the findings in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and pain intensity fell, pain duration fell, PMS, like bloating and water retention and moodiness, improved as well. Okay, wait a minute. How does this work? And what can your diet have to do with cramps? Okay, let me show you. This is a woman's uterus, off to the side of the ovaries, connected by the fallopian tubes. Look inside, in the very center of the screen. Do you see that pink line? That's the endometrial lining. That's the inner lining of the uterus. And every month that thickens in anticipation of pregnancy. And when the woman called me up on the phone, she said, I'm hurting. And I was thinking, why are you hurting? My educated guess was that she had too much estrogenic stimulation of the endometrial layer so that it was thickening up too much. And as it was, when it degenerates at the end of the month, it breaks apart to release prostaglandins that cause really bad pain. So if we can turn down the estrogens, we can turn down this process. That's the hypothesis. Now, by the way, for some women, it's worse. It's not just a thickened layer. For some, they have endometriosis. That's the cells from the endometrial lining are now implanting outside the uterus, all around the abdomen. And researchers have found that they're on the uterus, the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, even on the intestinal tract. So it's your period, but now your intestines are all messed up because of the endometrial growths. Wait a minute. Can we stop this? Tufts University, 1994. Researchers did a really cool study. They brought in 48 women. They put them on a metabolic ward, and they gave them special diets. Each diet was 8 to 10 weeks. Some of them cut the fat. Other diets increased fiber. Some did both. And they tracked what happened to their hormone. Now, what were they thinking? They weren't thinking cramps. They were thinking breast cancer. Because if I can reduce estrogens, I can reduce breast cancer risk. And it worked. Reducing fat, if you do nothing else but just cut the fat content of your diet, estradiol and free estradiol, estrone sulfate, these are all fractions of estrogen in a woman's body. They all drop. If I do nothing other than increase fiber, that's beans and vegetables and fruits and roughage, plant roughage, estrogen levels drop again. So I remembered this study, and when the woman called me up with menstrual pain, what was going through my mind was something is causing too much stimulation of your uterus, thickening that lining up too much. You feel horrible at the end of the month. Maybe if we can cut down on the estrogen circulating in your blood, maybe you'll feel better. And my educated guess was cut the fat, increase the fiber. So why a vegan diet? Because there's no animal fat in it at all. And everything you eat is from a plant, so it has maximum fiber. I wanted to cure her if I could. And we kept the oils low too. And that turned out to be the answer. Okay, let me walk you back through the fiber part of this. How could fiber affect hormones? Okay, see the liver? Liver is in the upper part of your screen. The liver filters estrogens out of the blood, excess estrogens, sends them down that green bile duct into the intestinal tract. And the estrogens go through the small intestine, through the large intestine, and actually down into the toilet. But if there happens not to be adequate fiber in your diet, that doesn't happen. If there's not enough fiber in your diet, the estrogens that are in the intestinal tract now don't stay there. They're reabsorbed back into the blood. And they end up back in the liver. Doctors call it enterohepatic circulation. What it is estrogen just cycling and cycling and cycling in a woman's body, and it never gets gone until she brings the fiber in her diet that stops that cycling and sends the estrogen out. Okay, want to make sure you're all paying attention? Spam. Does it have any fiber or no fiber? What do you think? Okay, you're right. It's not a plant, so it doesn't have any fiber. Here's a trash can. There it goes. KFC. Fiber or no fiber? Well, there is some fiber if you eat the carton. Otherwise, no, that can go too. How about, well, yes, you know what I mean. There are a lot of things that started out life as a plant, but in a factory, they lost out. And we're going to get rid of that junk too. Okay. Oh, one other thing. Cheese. Cheese comes from milk. Milk comes from the cow. Cows are impregnated annually to keep their milk production happening. Pregnant cows make estrogens. It gets in the plasma and then it gets in the milk, and they are milked during pregnancy. Yes, that's right. A cow's gestation is about 9 months, and for much of that pregnancy, they are milked. The estrogens that are produced in the cow's body get into the milk, and every scoop of ice cream, every slice of cheese that you ever ate or ever fed to your child had estradiol in it from a cow. That's not on the label. Yep, that's right. There's no such thing as hormone-free milk. It's all there. All right, shifting gears. One last example. We've talked about diabetes and the insulin hormone. We've talked about estrogens in a woman's body, and you're thinking, hopefully, wait a minute, this can control cramps, but maybe this can reduce breast cancer risk. You can see where we're going. We're getting control over our hormones. We're controlling all kinds of things that we used to think were just things that went bump in the night and we couldn't control. We can now do this. Okay, hot flashes are at the end of a woman's reproductive window. She's 55 now, and she's sitting in a boardroom, and she's going to have the symptoms of her ovarian activity coming to a stop. What's she feeling? Vasodilation. She's minding her own business, and the blood vessels in the skin widen out, and it's just like a radiator turning up. It's 150 degrees. She breaks into a sweat. That's a hot flash. They happen at night. And suddenly your room is 150 degrees and you're in a pool of sweat. And if this happens 3 or 4 times a night, your quality of life goes through the tank. Okay, well, what can I do? The doctor says I can take estrogens. Yes, but if you look at the prescribing information, there are quite a few risks that are disturbing, to say the least. Now, doctors argue about what's the real risk of endometrial cancer, breast cancer, stroke, blood clots, dementia. How often is that going to happen? Well, wait a minute. What if we decide that we're not going to take these risks? Could diet help us? A tentative yes came from Japan. Back in the 1980s, researchers interviewed women in Japan, and they found that hot flashes affected maybe 15% of postmenopausal women as compared to maybe 80% in North America. And when they had them, they were really mild. What was the diet? Rice, more rice, some vegetables, a little fish, more rice. No dairy at all to speak of, a little bit of meat here and there, but mostly plants were the bulk of the diet. Well, what's going on? The first hypothesis was tofu, soybeans, edamame. Soybeans have isoflavones, which are part of the reason that soybeans reduce the risk of breast cancer. But also researchers thought maybe that's why they're fighting hot flashes too. Well, more data came in as the Japanese diet westernized. Burgers came in. The golden arches arrived in Tokyo, and hot flashes went up to about 40% or a little bit more than that by the early 2000s. Okay, so it's not just the soybeans. There's something about this diet, a meaty diet, a Western diet, that's part of the problem. And further confirmation of that came not from Japan, but from Mexico. Fly to Cancun, get a rental car, drive 2 hours west. You'll be in a town called Valladolid. And researchers went there 20 years ago and interviewed 118 postmenopausal Mayan women. And what they found is they didn't have hot flashes. In fact, they didn't have any menopausal symptoms really at all. So, well, periods stopped and whatever, but no big deal. Okay, they're not eating rice. No, it's corn is their grain, and they're not eating soybeans, they're eating black beans, and they eat vegetables like, this is one called lechaya, which is not from Japan, but it's a big thing in Mayan traditions. And there's something about the plant-based diet that seems to be effective. Okay, so my research team decided to put this to a good test. Because if we can control the hormone shifts of menopause, maybe women don't even have to have a discussion about medicine because they are turning the dials themselves. Here's what we did. We brought in postmenopausal women. Half of them started a diet and the other half made no change. The diet was 3 things. It was no animal products, minimize oils, and a half a cup of soybeans every day. And we encouraged the women to follow this over a 12-week period. And first of all, the control group that didn't make any change gained a little bit of weight. The diet group lost almost 8 pounds. That's good. But the big thing was the change in hot flashes. The diet group dropped their hot flashes about 84%. Yep, huge. And the number of women who didn't have any hot flashes at all, well, everybody had hot flashes at the beginning, but by week 12, about 60% of women were free of the moderate to severe hot flashes. In the control group, there was no big change. And we saw other changes. Not only were these vasomotor symptoms changing more in the diet group, but so were psychosocial symptoms like mood, physical symptoms, and sexual symptoms. They all improved. Okay. Now, with regard to breast cancer, if you talk to people about soy and breast cancer, they have the idea that soy causes it. It's just the opposite. Soybeans affect primarily the beta estrogen receptor, not the alpha receptor. And so researchers have clearly shown that the more soy women consume, the lower their breast cancer risk. This is also true for women previously diagnosed with breast cancer. The high soy consumers have the lowest mortality. Let me be clear about that. Soy products reduce the likelihood of getting cancer and are associated with better survival. Okay. Now, by the way, if you're thinking, maybe I'd like to make some soybeans, but how do I do it? Quick tip. Edamame, delicious, but that's not what we're talking about here. Edamame is the juvenile soybean. Leave it on the vine a little longer and you get mature soybeans with a lot more isoflavones in them. And you can buy them online. You'll see all kinds of brands. They're non-GMO, organic, whatever you want. It's there. Pop it in your Instant Pot or your pressure cooker, cook them 40 minutes. Or soak them and boil them overnight, and real easy to do. You can do this. Okay, they come out, and then apportion them out, have a half a cup per day. This is a menopause treatment. You don't need it for anything else. That's all it is. You add them to a salad or a soup, or you can roast them too if you want. You can go online and buy roasted soybeans in bulk, or if you want, you can roast them yourself. It's very fun to do. You cook them as I described. Lay them out on a parchment-coated baking sheet. Bake them for an hour, 350. And wait, they got to be really dry. They shouldn't be mushy. Make sure they're totally dry. And then put them in a bag or in a container, season them with whatever you want. And it's a really cool snack. It's like dry roasted peanuts. And that's what we found could knock out hot flashes. Okay, healthy diet, fruits, grains, legumes, vegetables. You do need vitamin B12 for healthy nerves, healthy blood. Don't miss it. To start a healthy diet, if you're thinking, this is cool, but it sounds hard. It's the easiest thing in the world if we break it into 2 steps. Step 1, take 1 week and just check out the possibilities. Do this yourself. Take a piece of paper. Write breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. Take a week to fill this out with ideas of things that happen to be plant-based, like oatmeal for breakfast or almond milk on your cereal. Fair enough. Or a vegan pizza, no cheese. Fair enough. Or go to your favorite Italian restaurant and have the tomato sauce instead of the meat sauce. Or at a Mexican restaurant, beans and rice, veggie fajitas, easy. Chinese, rice dishes, tofu dishes, vegetable dishes. Or Japanese food. Why not have the sushi, not the fish sushi, have the cucumber roll, have the sweet potato roll, the asparagus roll, delicious choices. Now, Taco Bell is not the pinnacle of culinary art, but if you're trying to make a list of vegan things you might eat, well, they've got the bean burrito, hold the cheese, or Subway's got you covered. Okay, fair enough. A week later, you have done it. You've got your list. Great. Now, step 2 is now we're going to do 3 weeks on a totally plant-based diet. For the next 3 weeks, no animal products at all, but that's now easy because you've got your list. Okay, good. At the end of those 3 weeks, physically, you will have lost weight. If you have diabetes, your blood sugars are already getting better. Your digestion is better. But in addition to the physical changes, your attitude about food is different. You haven't had chicken wings in 3 weeks, and you discover, I don't really miss them. Okay, so it becomes really easy. This is my book, Your Body in Balance, which talks about all these things. But if you don't mind, I want to just share something more about food. Yes, Your Body in Balance has food, has good recipes. But there's one other food program that I want to share with you. This is free, and it's a service that we are encouraging companies to institute. Here's what I mean. Everyone has a seat at this table. If you look at any workplace, any university, any meeting room, any street in America, we are more diverse than ever before. And with that diversity means there are different dietary cultures, different dietary needs, different expectations that people may have. And so you're on the airline and they might say, well, we've got this kind of meal, that kind of meal, a million special meals, but oh, I'm sorry, we don't have yours. Stop. What if some people are gluten-free? What if some people are allergic to things and they're avoiding those, and somebody else has a religious mandate? I was raised in a Hindu tradition. I'm not going to eat beef. I don't want to have meat at all. Or what if I'm vegan? Are there foods that could work for all of these things? The answer is yes. If we skip problem ingredients, we can do it. Okay, what are those problem ingredients? I'm in this boardroom here. Here's a person who is from an Indian tradition and does not want to have beef. So beef, that's out. Here's somebody else from a Muslim tradition, says pork, if you don't mind, leave that out. Here's someone from an observant Jewish tradition who says, thank you for getting rid of the pork, but get rid of the shellfish too, if you don't mind. Here's someone who's got a peanut allergy. Peanuts, you're gone. Well, let's see. How about gluten grains? Some people have gluten issues. They're gone. And then here's somebody who doesn't want the animal products. Get rid of dairy, eggs, fish, maybe even honey. What does that leave? Vegetables, fruits, legumes, non-gluten grains like rice and corn and many others. We then worked with the Culinary Institute of America. It said, can you take these foods that ought to work for everybody, and can you turn them into meals that will be irresistible, that are going to work in my workplace or on a plane or on a train or wherever I might need? And we also worked with Sport Foods, which is in Hollywood, and we said, give me some of these foods that are kind of on the high end. And we also worked with a group to make some foods on the cheap end. And what they came up with was really fun. Golden waffles, sweet potato hash, and beautiful lentil soups, and an Aztec soup, and clear noodle soup. These are arancini. It's an Italian tradition. And this is the arancini in my fancy restaurant. This is the arancini on a plane. Yep, universal meals work anywhere. This is my veggie burger on the plane. Here it is in my restaurant. And the universal meals has all of these choices that we have made, including dessert items. What if we did this at Google? What it means is everybody has a seat at the table. I don't have to just say, well, I've got a gluten-free meal over here, or I've got this meal over there. As long as there's a universal meal, you're going to be covered. Okay? Would you like this idea? Wouldn't it be fun? We have all the menus, all the recipes, all the nutrient information for you, and we would love to see it happen. You'll see it at pcrm.org, or you can get in touch with me. Let me stop at that point, and I hope you found this useful. But before I finish, I just want to say a huge thank you. I know that you're watching this because you're interested in nutrition, you're interested in health, and these concepts are novel and powerful. And to the extent that we share them with other people, we intrigue other people in things that maybe might take a little time to understand their full import, but over time will inspire people to make changes that can even save their lives. And that's you that's done that. So thank you for allowing me to share this time with you.
Neil, thank you. That's great of you to come and share that knowledge with us today. I actually learned about a lot of this about 9 years ago when I went vegan myself, and you were one of the people I found that helped convince me. And so it's really great to have the chance to talk to you about this today. Kind of a bit of a dream for me, I guess, to say. So,
well, thank you, Pat. I'm delighted to be able to do this.
Awesome. So yeah, on that note, one of the first things I wanted to ask you about is like, I've noticed myself when I tell people about these things, like it almost seems too good to be true. Like how have I not heard that we can reverse diabetes and all these chronic diseases? I'm curious what your thought is on like, clearly you've done this research, you like have proven all these benefits. So like kind of what's why don't more people know about this, and what do you think?
Well, more and more people do. I'm right now speaking to you at Florida Atlantic University. And the reason I'm here is I was invited to do a lecture just before this. And the medical students are so eager to learn about this approach for various reasons. Partly, it addresses the cause of the problems. I mean, let's face it, if a person has a high cholesterol, they don't have a Lipitor deficiency. They've got, the drug is really just treating their diet excesses in maybe 90% of cases. So the students are really eager to. But I guess a couple of things should be said. I think we do need more research in certain areas. Also, diet is not going to necessarily have the same effect for everybody. One person's diabetes may improve dramatically, somebody else may not. That's possible. However, what we are discovering is that if we do the diet changes in the right way, we don't just take the skin off my chicken or have modest changes like that. We're really getting the junk out of the diet. When we do it, the diet is so much stronger, and it's really quite unlikely that a person would not benefit from it. So we're doing these research studies. We always try to make sure that we've got the data. But we're also open to individual experiences. And so I described a couple today where people have had an individual experience, which always prompts us to test it out in a larger numbers of people and end up doing controlled trials to see if the individual experience actually does pan out. I got to tell you, Pat, it's exciting to see things that befuddled us for a long time are now becoming clear.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be so rewarding to see these changes and hear like these personal stories of people making real improvements in their health and their lives. Your book is full of those stories. It's really inspirational, I have to say as well.
Yeah, Pat, I have to say, and for me, it's slightly more than that too. I grew up in North Dakota, and my father was the diabetes expert for Fargo and all of Eastern North Dakota. And he himself had grown up in the cattle business, and that's kind of the way we all ate, unfortunately. And so he was at the Fargo clinic, and every day he'd get home about 6:30, and he'd set down his medical bag, and I never, ever heard him say that anybody with diabetes ever got better. His whole job was to try to slow down the complications, to slow down the loss of sight, to make sure that you didn't have the amputation or try to avoid it. But still, people would die 10 or 15 years prematurely, and he didn't expect that you could reverse this disease because we never really gave the diet changes the chance. So it wasn't his fault, We didn't know what intramyocellular lipid was. We didn't have MR scanners at the time. We couldn't look in muscle cells as I'm able to do now. If they had been able to do that, I think we would have had these answers much earlier. But I want to tell you, Pat, I very often think I'd love to be able to tell my father about the technology that we have, what we've seen and how we can exploit it, and then how it comes full circle to just relating to simple dietary choices.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've talked about this too, but I'm from North Dakota as well, and my mom had borderline high cholesterol, and I told her about the stuff. I actually mentioned you as an example of someone else from North Dakota who's doing this, and she changed her diet, and now her cholesterol is totally normal, and mini success story there.
That's great. What are the odds? 2 North Dakotans on one call. That's
yeah.
It's got to be about half the state right there.
But on that note, actually, that leads into one question I had for you is like, what if you're doing all these things right, but you have friends and you have family members and you're worried about their health, but maybe they're a little harder to persuade. Do you have any tips for kind of how you can nudge other people in your life along toward these healthier choices?
Yes, well, it's that way every day in clinical practice. People don't want to be unhealthy; they want to be healthy. And in clinical practice, we recognize that we're not the employers of the patient. The patient has to be able to make his or her own choice. But it starts with information. And for many people, the information is totally new, like the idea that intramyocellular lipid, fat inside muscle cells, might impair insulin action. That's well known if you're in the Department of Endocrinology at Yale University. But if you work in a drugstore, you never heard of it. So we have to get the word out first. And that's, frankly, that's why I'm grateful to you and to many others who are able to reach a lot of people. But that's where it starts. And then the other piece is, once you've decided, I want to make a change, people do need some support because our culture may not be quite there with us. And that was the same with a person quitting smoking, or a person who's decided, I want to make some other healthy choice. I want to start exercising, but if my culture is not supporting me, what do I do? And that's why we have this 2-step method for making the diet change. And I got to tell you, when we do it, the patient says, I need to lose 65 pounds and I want to get off these medicines and da-da-da-da. We plan, let's say it's his diet, but we bring in his reluctant spouse too, so that they're all kind of getting on the same page together. And then the other thing is, you don't just say, here's your diet, go away. We get back together every week, at least by phone, because there are little bumps in the road. They're not bad. They're not tough, but there's little bumps in the road. I got a wedding in North Carolina. There won't be anything for me to eat. I'm on a road trip for business. What am I going to do? I had a craving for something, or whatever it is. They're easy problems, but they're there, and people need a little coaching. So my feeling is that if it's a friend, you can give them information, you can give them guidance, and if the information is there, they'll often get it. I do have one more tip for you, though, Pat, and that is, if you give people a book, that book is not going to get opened. I learned this with my dear mother. My mom had a high cholesterol level, like your mom, and I gave her a book that I wrote years ago. And I went and visited her 6 months later. And you know how you can tell when a book has not been opened? So finally, her own doctor threatened her with putting on Lipitor, and she finally decided to go vegan. And when she did, her cholesterol level plummeted, just like your mom. Okay, but I learned a lesson. Now when I give people a book, I do the Post-it trick. You take a Post-it, you put it on page 41. You take another Post-it, you put it on page 95. And another Post-it, you put it on page 120. And a final Post-it goes on the cover of the book and says, my friend, my mother, whoever it is, I thought of you at certain places in this book. I flagged them, you'll see. They will call you up a week later and say, I read that book 6 times. And I was trying to think what it was that made you think of me at those pages. And you say, really nothing. I just wanted you to read the book. So do the Post-it. This also works with videos. Give somebody a copy of Forks Over Knives or whatever and tell them between about 8 minute 45 and hour and 15, that was you. And they will watch it to find themselves, and it works every time.
That's a good trick. I want to quickly remind everyone to ask questions in the live chat. We will get to some of those soon. Just had a couple more things I wanted to ask. I feel like I have to ask you the obligatory question, where do you get your protein? As kind of a joke.
Yes, well,
but just to clear that one up.
Okay, that was sort of the 1950s view, was that protein was in meat, but not in other things. But there's actually plenty of protein in beans, grains, and vegetables, and any varied diet that includes these things provides the essential amino acids that build the protein you need. So not a big issue. But calcium is a little bit more of an issue. You're not having dairy, so have plenty of green leafy vegetables. They have calcium in them. I mean, there are other sources too, but greens are like just the healthiest. And don't forget B12. If you're doing those things, your diet's not only an adequate diet, it is like miles ahead of the diet you were doing before. It's now higher in vitamin C, higher in fiber. You've gotten rid of the bad fats. You're putting in your body the fuel that it's designed for.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely experienced that too, where like there's many other things that a lot of people are deficient in, and protein is rare to ever one of them. Another thing you mentioned in your body in balance, which I think is interesting just for people to be aware of and to demonstrate the power of these changes, is that if you are on medications, for example, for diabetes, you'll actually need and want to work with your doctor while doing these changes, because you may actually be effectively like taking too much of these medications as you address kind of these root causes, like the intramyocellular lipids you were talking about. So I just wanted to bring that up too.
The changes happen really fast. So if you've got diabetes and you're on medicines, let your doctor know that you are going to do a low-fat vegan diet. Your doctor, first of all, will jump for joy because they know it's a great way to go. But your insulin dose or whatever is very likely going to go way down. And so your doctor needs to work with you to ratchet you down in a sensible way. And then eventually, hopefully, get off of it if all goes well.
Yeah, I think that for me, that's one of the kind of the most striking things is like you may need to work with your doctor because like this diet is going to replace many medications. Another theme of the book for me is kind of like there are these many conditions that most people like seem to run into in our like culture and age, and I think it's tempting to assume that we're kind of just living longer and this is kind of just what happens. But you mentioned specifically in the book kind of this idea that people actually have been living to old age for a long time, and this is like not actually a new concept, and it doesn't just have to be this way. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on that topic.
Yes, where that really hit home for me was with regard to menopausal symptoms. There were writers who not so long ago said, well, if you're a woman over 50, you're past your sell-by date. The whole reason that you've lost your periods and everything is, if this was 1900, you'd be dead by now. So you're just, and let me say clearly, that is ridiculous, and there is nothing to it. As you said, Pat, people have lived long lives for a very long time. Menopause is not the end of life. Menopause is nature's way of saying, you're now in your 50s. This is not a time for you to have a toddler on your kitchen floor. The reproductive window is closed so that you can get on with life and do other things. And that's a perfectly sensible and normal thing. The symptoms that come with it appear to be, in many cases, greatly exaggerated by the dietary choices that are causing our hormonal transitions to be much more violent than they would otherwise be. And so now that we know that and we can put it to work, we can make that transition into, instead of it being a diagnosis, it's just a part of life.
Yeah, that's great. I think with that, we'll go to some audience questions. Let's see what the live viewers have. Question from Naga. With regards to plant-based food, does going organic and avoiding GMO help? Should we be checking on this? Thanks.
I think it's good to choose organic. I mean, if you have a choice between something that's got chemicals in it and something that doesn't have chemicals in it, to me, it's an obvious choice. And if it costs extra for organic, that's fine. You know, I mean, if that's what it costs to eat healthy food, I would do it. With regard to GMO, it's pretty easy to avoid GMO soy or GMO, many other GMO products. If something, let's say you buy tofu, if it says organic on the label, which most of the brands will, by law, it cannot be GMO. The GMO soybeans are what you feed cattle or chickens or pigs. Same with GMO corn. So yeah, it's not really clear that GMO matters that much for health, but personally, I'm trying to opt out of the experimental group. And so I just buy organic to the extent that it's possible. If you have no idea, and if the vegetables brought to you at a restaurant are organic or not, you're always better off having vegetables than not. But if you've got a chance to choose organic, it's good to get it.
So you'd pick a conventional vegetable over an organic animal, basically.
Absolutely. Keep in mind, an animal's body is a factory in and of itself. The animal's body is manufacturing cholesterol that gets into what you're eating. And no, you do not need to have the animal products. And I say, whenever I say that, my grandpa's rolling over in his grave because, you know, he spent his life raising cattle. And one of my grandpas on my mother's side died at age 62. And I thought, well, that's because they're old. And now we realize, wait a minute, our diet was not conducive to longevity at that time.
Yeah. All right, next question from Ivan. There are fake meat products on the market, which are mostly highly processed soy. The trade-off here is soy equals good, but many scientists say highly processed equals bad. How do you approach this?
I think soy is fine. You will see all kinds of scare messages all over the internet about soy causing cancer and all these things. It's really a misunderstanding and based on old research. When we look not in rats, but look in human beings, soy products are clearly associated with not just reduced risk of breast cancer, but also reduced risk of prostate cancer and also reduced cholesterol. That said, the closer the thing looks like a soybean, the better off it is. So if it's whole soybeans or something like tempeh, you can actually see a soybean there. Once it's pulverized and processed, it's less soybeans and who knows what they've added. I will also say that fake meat products, one of the easy kind of ways to separate them out is look at the saturated fat content. If it's pretty low, I think it's an okay choice. If your veggie burger doesn't have a lot of bad fat in it, great. And when I say not a lot, I mean as close to zero as possible. In recent years, the Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat, these have come up. They're not intended for vegans. They are intended to seduce meat eaters. So they take plant-based ingredients and they pack enough coconut oil in there so that it has the mouthfeel of a greasy burger. It's sort of nutritional methadone to try to get you off of your addiction. That's not what we're really talking about here. Most veggie burgers and veggie hot dogs and things are really quite low in fat and are okay choices, especially for kids. If it's birthday time, this is not the time to bring out the lentil loaf. You can give them all veggie hot dogs, and you know the neighbor kids won't beat your kid up.
Sounds good. I'll take the next question. Annie JK says, for those who've struggled with food restrictions, how do you keep a balance between a plant-based diet and other foods?
Okay, great question. The easiest thing to do is to think of these 4 food groups: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans. And that's your palate. If those things are part of your daily routine, that's good, complete nutrition. Don't forget the vitamin B12 that you need to add to it. So if you might have a food restriction of some type due to allergy or whatever, that's it. You don't eat that food. If you're gluten intolerant, if you're just avoiding gluten because you think like you feel better, that's something you could choose or not. But if you've got celiac disease, you cannot have gluten. So that just means you don't have wheat and you don't have rye and you don't have barley, but you can have rice and corn and cleanly produced oats and lots of other things. So those 4 food groups should keep you covered.
Sounds good. Yeah, I can actually can relate to this too. And in the past, in my own journey, some people who have worked with me in the past know I've gone like very extreme, like no oil, no like processed food ever. And that, like, you can do that, but it also, like, you can get to a point where that's pretty inconvenient. So lately I've trying to be more open to, like, if I go to the office and there's some oil in the food, like, not thinking that's like the end of the world. So I can relate to there's a balance, and I just mainly think, like, I think it kind of clarifies it if you kind of you want to exclude like animal products and you want to like kind of keep the oil low, but there can be special occasions too. You don't have to have the lentil for your birthday. I like that. We'll take the next question from Evan. Has the difference in effectiveness between intermittent fasting versus veganism in fighting insulin resistance been studied? I've heard intermittent fasting can be effective too.
No, to my knowledge, nobody has done a controlled trial where some people went on intermittent fasting and others went on the vegan diet. But with regard to the pathology relates to the buildup of fats in the muscle cells and liver cells. Those fats come primarily from diet. That's the source. So getting them out of the diet should really be the first step. And there are some people who will add intermittent fasting to it if they want to. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. The only danger with intermittent fasting is, let's say it's Saturday and Sunday are going to be your fasting days. If you find over time that you're anticipating that on Friday and overeating a little bit and then making up for it on Monday with a little bit too much, what you'll discover is that the benefits are kind of being lost. But apart from that, intermittent fasting is an okay way to go if you want to do that. But I wouldn't do it instead of a healthy diet. I would do it in addition.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'd say you can definitely do both. And yeah, I agree. Like, if you are like doing it more extreme, that might like increase cravings, and maybe that might kind of like fall off the wagon in terms of like what you eat. And might be something to think about too. We have one more question lined up. I'll take that one from Ashley. There have been so many this might be fads, non-fat, healthy fats, organic, paleo, fasting. As time goes on, I'm skeptical about this just being another one. What would you say about this diet being here to stay?
Well, thank you for that. First of all, this diet has been, the kind of diet that I'm describing, getting away from animal products and so forth, has been subject to an enormous amount of clinical testing. And that's been very reassuring about recognizing that its power is real. With regard to some other diets, other fad diets, that's really not the case. And for example, on a ketogenic diet, people will lose weight on it pretty clearly. And not everyone does, but many people do. But when you look at what happens with their lipids, it's often really not what you want. And so the more we test these things, the more their benefits become clear, and the risks become clearer as well. And with a plant-based diet, you just don't see those risks. Culturally, a vegetarian or vegan diet wasn't invented, in the past 6 or 7 years. I mean, this is something that goes back millennia. And the motivations for it now are multiple. I'm a doctor. I'm talking about diabetes. But on the other hand, many people, when I see a patient comes in and we talk about plant-based diets, they will say, well, my brother went vegan for the environment, because I can't in good conscience be eating meat, eating dairy products when I understand what it's doing to the environment. Or somebody else says, well, my biggest motivation is for the animals. When you start to realize that the animals are not volunteers, that what happens to them is, including the animals raised by my family, really very challenging to think about and to contemplate. And when people realize that Americans eat 1 million animals every hour, and maybe you don't want That's right, 1,000,000 per hour. Maybe you think, I don't really want to be part of that anymore. All of these motivations are there. They're not going away. So I think there's a reason why plant-based diets have been growing and growing and growing, and now the commercial products are coming in to satisfy that demand. Although I got to tell you, getting back to simple stuff, vegetables and fruits and beans and grains, it really has got you covered pretty much most of the time.
Yeah, for sure. We personally eat a lot of just simple like pasta and vegetable kind of stuff. Gotten kind of more in touch with food actually as a result, kind of counter to what you might expect. Yeah, that's great. I think too, I feel like it's kind of just win-win-win. Like, not only does this address a lot of health issues, there's environmental issues, there's ethical issues, and so totally agree with that.
And you know, Pat, that was kind of why I brought up the universal meals question, because there are so many people who are looking for something because maybe their tradition is they were raised in a Muslim household. And so, but now where they are, it's hard to avoid the pork being all over the cafeteria line. And it's just like, I really don't want that. And the idea of universal meals, this is something where it's not as if diversity is a fad or diverse needs are a fad. These are here to stay. So I'm frankly kind of hoping that maybe people at different Google facilities might say, okay, let's try it. And if so, that would be really a fun project to see people feeling that they had a place at the table.
Yeah, sounds good to me. But the last few minutes we have, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of like let people know more about your work and where they can find out and support it. Particular, in addition to all this research, you run the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and the Barnard Medical Center. And just wanted to give you a few minutes to let people know more about those things and where they can find out more.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That's very kind of you. Yeah, the Barnard Medical Center is it's a medical center. It's in Washington, D.C. It's a clinic where people go because they've got diabetes or some weight to lose or some cholesterol to get rid of. And so they come in and see us, and we will use medicines if we need them, but we mostly try to get people off their medicines to the extent we can and help people to really feel better. But we also do a lot of work by telemedicine, and the pandemic has really pushed that process along. So our website is barnardmedical.org, and you'll see a lot of information about that, including telemedicine if people are interested in that side of things. With regard to the Physicians Committee, we do research studies. We do a lot of them where we bring in individuals, we change their diets, we see how they're doing. And this was our menopause work and our pain work and our diabetes work. And we've got lots more of these studies right now. And I hope people will stay involved with us. And I might mention one other thing, that we're trying to make sure that research is worthwhile and that it's ethical. And back when we got started, I'll never forget, there was a Diabetes Foundation that contacted me and said they were tired of funding rat experiments. And they said, everybody wants to create a diabetic model in a rat. And they said, we're not getting anywhere with this. Can we work with people and understand the disease in people? And I said, yes, you can do it, but we've got to do it the right way and I have become so impressed with the benefits of focusing on the human species, not just the ethical benefits of not having to deal with experiments on monkeys, cats, dogs, rats, mice, whoever it is, but also on the scientific benefit of being able to actually, now I can do something that my dad could never do. I can look into your body with MR spectroscopy, and I can see your liver and your muscles while you are living and breathing. And with my DEXA scanner, I can tell you about things that we couldn't have told decades ago. We can do that now. So I am very excited about what technology allows us to do. And when we can do it in human patients, ethically and carefully, it gives us not only the best possible science, but results that apply almost immediately. So that's the work that we're doing here at the Physicians Committee. And if people would like to see more about it, our website is pcrm.org.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing this information. I hope this helps people listening and family members, and I'm just happy to help spread this information. And thank you for taking the time today.
Well, thank you. And when we go back to North Dakota, we'll have to see our relatives all having lefse and krumkaka and the occasional bit of lutefisk, and we'll talk to them about healthier choices if we need to.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you, Pat.
Bye.